Breaking news. Welcome to today's headlines. General Dambazao and I were asked to announce military coup, removing Jonathan from office. General Kukasheka Usman reviews. General Dambazao and I were asked to announce military coup, removing Jonathan from office. General Kukasheka Usman reviews. To my dear listeners from wherever you're listening from, please stay tuned as I read today's news. Retired Nigerian Army General has admitted knowledge of an attempted coup d'etat to overthrow President Goodluck Jonathan in 2010. A disclosure that underscored the specter of a brutal power play that loomed over the country's first president from a minority ethnic group. Kukasheka Ishman, a brigadier general who served for years as army spokesman until his voluntary retirement in 2019, said he was part of a closed group of officers who worked with the then Chief of Army Staff Abdurrahman Dambazao to manage the violent overthrow that was brewing among the military top brass. When we visited 44 Reference Hospital, Kaduna, people were asking when is the announcement going to be made about taking over the government. I am so happy General Akinyemi, the GOC3 Armored Division is still alive. You can ask him. Mr. Huseman said while speaking at the 2022 Blueprint newspaper annual public lectures and Impact Awards on Tuesday in Abuja. Mr. Huseman said Mr. Dambazao did not execute the coup largely due to his so-called patriotism and entreaties of foreign diplomats. The international community showed concern to the extent that they had to meet with him, where he promised that he will not take over the government, Mr. Usman said. He said some politicians were also involved in the defunct coup moves, which had reached as advanced stage that only a phone call from Mr. Dambaza would have been enough to set things in motion. A simple phone call to him, General Akinyemi, to roll out the tanks, and General Dambaza would have been head of state, but he resisted that temptation, the retired brigadier general claimed. Mr. Akinyemi, a retired major general, led the armored division in Jos for several years. I am saying this with every sense of responsibility because, at that time, the same group of politicians were the ones lobbying him to take over government unconstitutionally. We have the records, and when he started writing the memo with due respect to him, I told him that he had to mention the names of the individuals so that posterity will remember them for who they are, Mr. Huseman added. But despite publicly asserting direct knowledge of the coup effort, Mr. Eastman did not clarify whether or not Mr. Jonathan was briefed about it or how the matter was handled. He was also silent on how the officers who prepared the purported coup and demanded a timeline of an announcement were treated, indicating Mr. Dambazao and the larger military leadership at the time might have shielded the officers from treason charges. Discussing a coup is a criminal offense that should ordinarily attract a court martial, as it is considered a grave threat to national security. Whereas Mr. Yisman claimed Mr. Dambazao had respect for the Nigerian constitution and its democratic underpinnings, the former chief of army staff was widely known to be dismissive of the former president. In 2010, Mr. Dambazao deployed Nigerian troops across Abuja and shut down the capital city's only international airport without informing Mr. Jonathan, who was the acting president at the time. Mr. Dambazao took the action to secretly bring an alien president Umaru Musa Yar'Adua into the country. Mr. Yar'Adua died a few days later on May 5, 2010, and Mr. Jonathan fired Mr. Dambazao in September 2010, month after he asserted full control of power. A spokesman for Mr. Jonathan did not return a request seeking comment about whether or not the president was aware of an attempt to overthrow his government. Mr. Jonathan's succession of Mr. Yar'Adua in 2010 and his subsequent election the following year for a 4-year term marked key historical moment for Nigerians' democratic experience. He was the first president out of Ijaw, an ethnic minority in Nigeria's oil-rich south. He was widely pilloried as an Ijaw Christian president by the opposition, and his government was preoccupied with the Boko Haram insurgents in consuming the northern Muslim regions of the country. In 2015, Mr. Jonathan lost to Muhammadu Buhari, a former military dictator who had joined forces with some elements that promised to make the country ungovernable to Mr. Jonathan. To my dear listeners, now we've come to the end of our today's news. Please do drop by at the comment section and let's know what your view